I grew up in a small blue house on a quiet street in Boston, America. The paint was chipped along the window frames, and the porch steps creaked when you put your weight on them. In autumn, a leaning maple let its leaves fall like rust-colored rain, and I used to sweep them into neat lines that the wind ruined 5 minutes later. My mother, Evelyn, said the house needed firm hands and lists, so she kept a clipboard on a hook by the kitchen door. My sister, Clara, could do no wrong, and my father, Robert, wore his silence like a coat he never took off. It was a house where dinner was on time, and feelings were late or never came. I slept in a room at the back that caught the morning light. The walls were the color of salt, the floor old and smooth. As a child, I pressed my ear to the boards at night and listened to the house breathe. The boiler clicking, the pipes knocking, the soft shush of leaves against the siding. When I got older, I learned the house made other sounds. The careful hush after a lie, the fast, bright laughter when my mother praised Clara, and the cool, even tone she saved for me, like a line drawn on paper too straight to be kind. Evelyn had rules for everything. She believed a woman should be useful and graceful, which meant I had to fold laundry with edges sharp as paper and pour coffee without a single drop on the table. She said a house showed the truth of a person. If a cushion sagged or a clock stopped, she looked at me as if I had failed my duty to time itself. She also said money should be quiet, like a good guest. We don't talk about it, she warned. We manage it. I took that to mean I should build my own life in a careful, steady way. I worked, I saved, and I kept my hopes small enough to fit in a drawer. Then I met a man who made my hopes step out of the drawer and breathe. His name was James Smith, though I mostly called him Mr. Smith at first because he carried himself with a calm I wanted to respect. We met at a bookshop one winter afternoon when the air smelled like wool and rain. He asked if he could buy me tea. I said yes, and kept saying yes to the soft, good things that followed. Long walks along the river, easy jokes, the quiet joy of his company. He told me he wanted a life that was honest and warm. I told him I wanted a life where love did not feel like a test. We fit in a way that felt sound, like a door closing with the latch set right. When I got engaged, my family smiled strangely, as if we were in a play and they had been handed roles they didn't like. Clara kissed my cheek and whispered, "I always knew you'd find someone." Her lipstick left a neat mark that I wiped away in the mirror. My mother put a hand on my shoulder and said, "This is surprising." The pause in that sentence was a room full of doubt. My father squeezed my fingers and let go. In the evenings, I caught them whispering in the dining room, cutting their voices short when I walked in. The silver bowl on the buffet was always polished to a hard shine, as if it had been scolded. A week later, I learned the truth that broke the house open. My mother wanted my fiancé to marry Clara, not me. She said it in the kitchen one night while the kettle burned, and no one moved to save it. "Listen to me," she said, soft but sharp. "You think this is for you, but it should be for your sister. She has the right presence." She looked me up and down, as if measuring fabric. "We can fix this. Men change their minds all the time." My hands shook so badly, I gripped the edge of the counter to stop the rattle. I didn't know how far she would go until I checked my account the next morning. The number looked wrong, like a word spelled almost right, but not quite. I called the bank and listened as a polite voice explained the transfer. $131,000 gone. The woman on the line recited dates and approvals in a tone that made it sound normal. It was not normal. It was theft. It was my mother. I saw her signature in my mind, clear as ink drying on a page. I walked home and found her at the dining table, the silver bowl throwing little moons of light on the ceiling. "You took my money," I said, my voice low and flat. She didn't flinch. "For family needs," she replied. "You'll understand when you're older," I told her. I was old enough now. She set her napkin down with care, as if that mattered more than my heart cracking in my chest. "You won't get married," she told me. "Your sister will." The sentence lay over my life like a heavy sheet. I went upstairs and closed my door. I held the printed statement in both hands until the paper went soft. I thought about every hour I had worked, every small thing I had given up to save. I thought about how love had made me bold and how fear could make me small again. Then I felt something steady rise in me, something that did not ask for permission. If they could take money, they could take more. If they could name my future for me, they would, and they already had tried. I sat on the floor by the bed, let the light move across the wall, and made a list that was not for the house but for myself. Tell the truth. Keep the ring. Call James. Do not beg. Do not bend. I pressed my palm against the floor and felt the boards hold me up. The house could breathe and sigh and judge. It could not decide who I would be. I would. I stood, wiped my face with the heel of my hand, and chose my next breath like it was the first one I owned. Clara's wedding day came fast, like a train that skips your stop. The church stood bright against a clean blue sky in Boston, America. Its white steps swept so often they looked new. Bells rang and made the air shake. I wore a plain blue dress with a careful hem I stitched myself the night before. It fit me like a promise. Simple, true mine. I took a seat near the back, where I could see without being seen. From there, I watched bouquets pass like clouds, roses tight as fists, ribbons tied in perfect loops. Everything was tidy and shining, the way my mother liked it. My mother, Evelyn, floated down the aisle before the ceremony, giving orders with a smile that felt like a small knife. She did not meet my eyes. My father, Robert, stood near the front and checked his watch, a habit that made time feel like a scold. My Aunt Diana leaned toward Grace and whispered that I had lost my chance, and they both pressed their lips in the shape of pity. I let their words move past me like cold air. I thought in my own list, tell the truth, keep the ring, call James, and I held on to it the way a swimmer holds the side of the pool when the water rises. Clara arrived wrapped in silk, the dress cut to make the room look at her and not look away. She smelled like sweet powder and new money. Later, I would hear that the gown had come from a London designer and cost $12,000, which seemed like a price for a car, not a dress, but the number fit the day. Bold, bright, a little loud. Clara paused at my row. She bent her head as if to kiss me on the cheek and then laughed softly, the kind of laugh that points at you. Don't worry, Teresa, she said. Some girls are not meant for big love. She lifted her bouquet like a flag and kept walking. I felt heat rise to my face and then pass, like a wave that breaks and slides away. I reminded myself that I had asked my real fiancé to meet me after the ceremony. James Smith, Mr. Smith in my mind then, though he would soon be James to everyone who mattered, had kept his life quiet on purpose. He told me one night, as we split an apple in my small kitchen, that money draws out people's worst stories, and he wanted our story to stay clean. I understood. I had seen how my family changed shape when they thought of dollars and what they could do with them. So we waited. We made no grand show. We built a steady thing, the way you build a house that will stand through winter. The vows began. Music filled the high ceiling, and sunlight slid across the floor like water. I watched Clara say words about honor and care. I wondered if she knew what those words meant. I wondered if my mother knew. In the back of the church, I kept my shoulders straight and my hands folded in my lap. Grace turned once to look at me. Her eyes were bright with curiosity, like she wanted to see me break. I did not. I breathed in and out and thought of the brownstone James had once described on a quiet street in New York, the kind of place that smelled like coffee and stone in the morning. He had told me we could find a home like that. He had said, "We'll make rooms where you can't hear your own voice." After the kiss and the cheer and the long walk back down the aisle, there were photos on the church steps. The photographer called out poses and names, and people rearranged themselves like furniture. My mother waved Clara forward and pulled me back with the lightest touch. A sweet smile stretched across her face. "Family first," she said to me, as if I were not part of it. I stood at the edge and felt the old ache, the ache of being nearby, but not inside. Then I remembered the path I had chosen. I was no longer asking to be let in. I had a door of my own. On the lawn, a caterer passed crystal flutes and small cakes on shining trays. Someone said the champagne was $250 a bottle, as if the price could bring joy. Diana leaned close and asked if I had found something sensible to do, now that my engagement had changed. I looked at her, at the soft skin at the corner of her eyes, at the way a mean thought made her mouth tilt. "Yes," I said. "I've found something very sensible." She blinked, confused, and smiled as if I had paid her a compliment. Clara's laughter lifted again from a ring of bridesmaids, bright and easy, as if it had never hurt a soul. I slipped away to the side path lined with boxwoods and checked my phone. One message from James. "I'm here. Take your time. I'm by the old elm." His care lived in the quiet parts of sentences, the way he never rushed me, the way he left space. I felt a calm settle over me, the kind that makes your spine feel like a straight beam in a good house. I put the phone in my bag and walked back toward the crowd, ready to stand where I needed to stand and say what I needed to say. When I returned, my mother was telling a group of guests that Clara had always been the light of our home. She lifted her glass and nodded toward me without saying my name. I thought of the map of my life, the small blue house in Boston, the studio I dreamed of starting in Chicago, the future trip to Europe I would take on my own terms, with my own $5,000 saved for the ticket and the room. I thought of how love had taught me to draw my own borders. The bells began to ring again, calling everyone toward the cars. People started to move, and the air shifted. I stepped into the center of the lawn and raised my voice just enough to carry. "I have someone to meet after the photos," I said, not to anyone and to everyone. "Someone important to me." A few faces turned. Clara rolled her eyes. My mother's smile held still, but the corners of it trembled, as if they were tired. I felt no tremble in me. The path to the old elm waited in the sun. I smoothed the skirt of my blue dress, held my head level with the horizon, and walked forward into the part of the day that belonged to me. Outside the church, the sun pressed warm on the old red bricks, and the steps shone from many shoes. People drifted into groups the way iron filings follow a magnet, toward Clara, toward my mother, toward the camera. The photographer called out names as if arranging furniture. I stood a few paces off, near a hedge of boxwood, and watched the day move without me. The bells had stopped. The quiet felt like a held breath. I smoothed the skirt of my blue dress and walked forward until I stood on the top step, level with the front doors and the bright white columns. "I have something to say," I told my family. They turned, but only with their eyes. My mother, Evelyn, kept her smile in place and let it sharpen. My father, Robert, pinched the bridge of his nose as if I were late to a lesson he had already taught. Clara glanced down at her bouquet, then up at me, and let a small laugh fall into the warm air. Aunt Diana leaned to Grace and whispered a question I did not need to hear. Someone coughed. The photographer waited, bored, his finger resting on the button. From the street below, a quiet hum grew louder, the sound of good tires on clean pavement. A black car slid to the curb and rested there in a way that did not ask for space. It simply had it. The driver stepped out and opened the rear door. A man in a dark suit, simple and clean, swung his feet to the ground and stood. He did not hurry. He straightened his jacket, looked up at the church, and then found me as if there was no one else in the world. I felt my breath steady. The day turned in my direction. I came down the steps to meet him. His hand found mine, easy and known, and I felt the old fear fall through a hole in the floor. We turned back to the crowd together, shoulder to shoulder. "Everyone," I said, and my voice did not shake. "Meet my real fiancé. This is Mr. Smith, a billionaire." The word billionaire landed like a glass bell in the middle of the steps. Silence rang out. My mother's mouth opened a little, like a door that had not been used in years. Clara gripped her bouquet too hard, and the stems snapped with a soft, wet sound. My father's face held steady, but his eyes flicked left and right, counting exits. Aunt Diana made a small O with her lips. Grace set her hand to her throat as if she had swallowed a stone. James moved with a calm that made space for other people's shock. He introduced himself to each person the way a good host would, steady and warm. He shook my father's hand and held it a second longer than needed, the kind of hold that says, "I see you." He nodded to my mother. "Mrs. Carter," he said, and she gave him the smile she once saved for bankers. He touched the edge of Clara's bouquet, as if to rescue it from her grip, then let it be. When he reached Diana and Grace, he thanked them for looking after the family festivities. He said the word family so gently it felt like a reminder, not a claim. I asked Teresa to keep me private, he told them, and his voice was soft enough to pull people closer. I didn't want money to twist love. He turned to me, and the bright day felt like a room with a door I could close behind us. Are you ready? I am, I said. The words were simple and strong, like a beam under a roof. Behind us, the photographer cleared his throat and suggested a picture with the happy couple, if this is a moment to celebrate. My mother's eyes flashed, some quick math running behind them, numbers turning, choices rearranging. She reached out as if to touch my elbow, then let her hand fall. Teresa, she said, be sensible. We can talk. The pause was a hallway she wanted me to walk down. I stayed where I was. Clara found her voice. So this is your game, she said, and the words were sweet at the edges and bitter in the middle. You bring a rich man to my wedding to make a scene. She looked James over in a way that counted, not admired. How very clever of you. Not a scene, I answered. Just the truth. The driver brought up a small envelope, cream paper, my name written in James's clear hand. It held a folded deed copy, the proof of the brownstone we had put under both our names in New York, America. The purchase price, for $1,200,000, sat on the page like a plain fact. Walls, windows, a kitchen with clean stone. Below it, another paper, a trust in my name with $3 million, not for show but for safety. They were not shields, they were keys. I did not hold them up. I did not need to. The weight of their truth lived in my spine. My father took a step toward me. We made mistakes, he said, softer than I had heard him speak in years. Let's not add one more. I thought of the day my mother took $131,000 from me and called it family needs, the way a thief hides a hand in a silk glove. I thought of Clara's line, some girls are not meant for big love, and how I had learned to answer my own life with my own voice. I'm not adding anything, I said. I'm subtracting what hurts. James squeezed my fingers, then let go so I could stand on my own feet in front of the people who had once told me who I was. I lifted my chin and looked across the steps, face to face, and felt a calm drop through me like a plumb line finding true. I wish you well, I said, but I am not staying in a story where love is counted like coins. Clara laughed again, but it was a thin sound now, not the bright ribbon she had thrown around the morning. You'll come back, she said. Everyone comes back. My mother said nothing. She stared at the car as if it were a ship with no gangplank. We won't, James answered, smiling without heat. We're going home. Home, to me, was not only an address or a deed. It was the way he said we and meant it with his whole chest. It was a kitchen that would smell like coffee and toast while I sketched designs for a studio in Chicago, where I would pay my team fair salaries, $85,000 to start, because steadiness is a form of love. It was a plan to visit London and Europe next spring, where we would rent a small flat for £5,000 a month and walk by the river holding hands like people who have nothing to hide. I turned once more to my father. His shoulders had dropped, as if some old armor had slipped. I wished him better days, and meant it. Then I took James's arm, and we walked down the steps, past the stunned guests, past the photographer who lowered his camera as if the moment did not belong to film. The driver closed the door behind us with a soft, sure click. As the car pulled away from the curb, I looked back at the church growing smaller in the window, and I did not feel small with it. I felt right-sized to my own life. James laced his fingers with mine. No rush, he said. Just forward. Forward, I said, and the word fit in my mouth like a new key turning. We left the old story on the steps with the broken stems and the careful smiles, and we carried the quiet of our true choice into the bright afternoon that waited for us, like a house with every light on. We married quietly 2 weeks later in New York, America. The ceremony was small and calm, just a simple promise said out loud and signed in ink. Afterward, We walked home through streets that smelled like rain and bread. The brownstone we bought for $4,200,000 waited with its tall windows and steady brick, a house that felt like it had a spine. Inside, the kitchen held clean stone and the faint scent of coffee even before the first pot was brewed. We unpacked dishes and dreams in the same afternoon, and I slept that night with my hand in James's, the city's hum like a soft engine under our future. James told me I should never have to ask for safety. He meant it. He set up a fund in my name with $3 million, and the paperwork sat on our table like a small, quiet guard. "Your voice is worth more than any number," he said, but he made room for both, voice and number, so that I could choose with no fear. The first choice I made was simple. I would not shrink my hopes. I wanted a life I could walk through with my head level and my feet warm. I wanted work that felt like my own hands making a door that opens. I registered a small design studio in Chicago and signed a lease for a sunny corner floor. I hired a first team and paid them $85,000 a year because I remember how thin it feels when pay is lower than your worth. We built a space with long tables, soft chairs, and a pinboard where ideas could live before they were ready. On our first big project, a baker asked us to turn an old store into a place that smelled like welcome. I sketched at the window while snow made the city bright. When the baker opened the door to a line down the block, I cried on the sidewalk and laughed at myself for crying. At night, I flew back to New York and walked the river with James. We learned the city's quiet routes, the ones that sneaked past noise and found light. In the mornings, he made eggs while I wrote notes for my team. We kept a small notebook by the kettle for things we wanted to remember. Buy flowers on Thursdays, call the roofer, read that book about bridges. We saved for joy, too. In spring, I sent my best friend Lena to Europe for a 3-month research stay and rented her a London flat for £5,000 a month. The key arrived in a small envelope, and I wrote her a note that said, "Use the time like a field." My family kept calling. My mother sent long messages that folded back on themselves, apologies wrapped in reasons, reasons wrapped in small requests. Clara mailed a photo of herself in her wedding dress with a line that read, "Sorry if I hurt you." My father said he missed the sound of me at the kitchen sink. I let the phone ring. I let letters gather in a drawer. I wished them a life with soft days, but I did not walk back into the house that had once held my name like a mistake. People say silence is cold, but mine felt warm, like a coat that finally fit. Work grew. The studio took on a library on the south side and a community center that needed bright halls and good doors. I kept my rules simple. Pay on time, tell the truth, design for the way a person's hand reaches a handle. When I signed our first contract over $500,000, I brought home takeout and we ate on the floor because we were painting the dining room. James told me the color would catch the morning light like butter. I told him I was not afraid of large numbers anymore. They were just tools like a good ladder or a level that finds true. There were soft days, too. We took a long weekend in Boston, America, and walked past my old street when the leaves turned. I did not pause at the small blue house. I did not need to. We kept moving and bought coffee that tasted like smoke and sugar, and we held hands without thinking about it. One evening in New York, the city lights made a net across the window, and James poured tea. "Do you ever doubt your choice?" he asked. I looked at our table, at the plant we kept forgetting to water, at the pair of boots by the door that did not hurt my feet. "No," I said. I chose love that did not steal from me. We gave when we could. James wrote a check for $250,000 to a shelter that helped women start new lives, and I spent Saturdays there teaching how to sketch a room and plan a budget. I told them what I had learned the hardest way. Name your numbers out loud, then name your needs, and make sure the needs lead. I learned to measure not only walls, but peace. At home, we cooked simple meals and left the dishes to soak while we danced in the kitchen to old songs that did not boast. Sometimes we said nothing for a long time and smiled because the quiet felt full. By summer, London called to us. We planned a month there, the kind where days stretch and ideas catch. We booked a small flat facing a square for £5,000 and made a list of bridges to cross on foot. I wanted to see how other cities hold their weight, how stone meets river, how people pause on a rail to watch light move. We would come home in time for fall in America, for apples and wool coats, and new contracts spread across our table with mugs, leaving warm rings. I felt my life hold together the way a well-built house does. Not loud, not proud, just sure. I am the one telling this. I am the one living this. When I lock our door at night, the click is mine. When I wake, the light that slides across the floor finds me in my own shape. There are dollars and pounds and deeds and plans, but the richest part is this. My voice fits my life, and my life answers back. I chose a home that does not keep score. I chose a love that gives room to breathe. And every day I choose forward.